How's it going, Limit Break? This is I'm Ghoul02. Unfortunately, we have a little bit of thing. I can't get the name tags working for the first podcast that we're doing, but this is the official RPG Limit Break podcast. This is our first episode. Tentatively, we are calling it RPG Limit Breaks. We will take no criticism of our very, very hard thought name. But
Perfect, no notes.
yeah, so we've been trying to get more content on the channel in general, basically since last Limit Break, and one of our goals was to get something regular that people can kind of tune in for and have fun. And I don't know about y'all, but when I'm working, I like to just kind of listen to people talk and just have fun talking about cool things for an hour to an hour and a half. That is what this is going to be. So every other week is what our current plan is. We're going to get a cool guest to talk about a cool topic and go from there. It could be about mostly RPG speedrunning, but it could be just like RPG speedrunning adjacent things. I know, there's a new Final Fantasy coming out. Maybe we'll have an episode where we just talk Final Fantasy lore and have fun with that, right? But as always, we're going to have a set of rotating hosts. So for this episode, we have two guest hosts. GK, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Hi, everybody. I'm GK. You might remember me from when we did our discussion of the Limit Break 2023 schedule. I'm also somebody who has been on many different shows with Ghoul, so I figured we'd be able to get things working for a start.
And then Netara is our other guest host. Netara, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit?
Hi there, I'm Netara. I'm a part of the RPG Valkyries, and I've been around the Limit Break space for, oh god, many years now. So I'm here to help out and ask Highspirits uncomfortable questions.
Only the most uncomfortable questions.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then for every episode, we're going to have a guest. So, our guest for this episode is, of course, the always incredible Highspirits. Highspirits, how are you doing?
Oh, not too bad. Thank you for having me and giving me this giant head. I can't put my Gollum head on now because no one would see it. But yeah, I'm here to talk some questing for glory, and I may or may not have been on this channel a couple of times in my, over the years.
Just a couple times. We keep making you play Lunar for some reason.
Yeah, I actually got to play a Dragon Quest finally.
Because Lunar's excellent. How dare you?
How do you feel about the certain Lunar game on the DS, Highspirits?
It was a game that was made. I think I just have to say it. I really do apologize for doing that game at RPG Limit Break. I heartfelt apology that you all had to go through that, just as much as I had to go through it.
You're not sorry. Don't pretend.
I mean,
There was a fun exchange amongst Limit Break staff and LLK who did our badges and some of our graphics this year, who I believe finally played it this year, and just was talking about what a peculiar video game that Lunar Dragon song really is. And I just love Puexel just chiming in there. The only Limit Break run that ever had to be started with an apology.
We had a Limit Break run that literally killed SNES.
I feel bad about doing that run. I really do.
And it killed 2 SNESs, Ghoul, and a TV. 26 Limit Break 2016. We have a lot of memories of that one. Between Draken breaking televisions and Punchcat breaking attendees.
Those are two very different things.
They are. It was just everything was breaking, except thankfully not the event, except for the time when Kingdom Hearts 2 got unplugged by accident.
Oh no.
Oh man.
The nobody's got a hold of the system.
No one ever unplugs or accidentally ejects a game during a run. What are you talking
Never
about?
happened. Not even once.
Poor Casa.
You could just see the horror on his poor face when that happened.
Mm-hmm.
The best part was like, Hobbs like, put the disc back in. Like he's like, I'm trying. It's gotta pop it all the way out first. Gosh, good times.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing we're talking about today, we do have a upcoming marathon on the channel. We tend to run community marathons on Limit Break quite a bit. I've run the SMT marathon. GK has done RPG Blitz, but those pale in comparison to how awesome and how big Questing for Glory is. I know that I always think of it as kind of like off-season limit break in a way, where it's like we get to do a lot of bigger
Mhm.
things, but because it's like general and we see a lot of cool things, I've always thought of it in a similar light. Uh, Highspirits, why don't you talk a little bit about what Questing for Glory actually is?
Sure, I can talk. I can tell you all the history and everything too. Uh, but yeah, this is that was the idea of it originally. This was back in 2017. You know, that probably about 50 years ago. And I was just, back then there wasn't a lot of marathons. There wasn't a lot of on-site marathons. There wasn't a lot of online marathons. It was just, you had a few of the bigger ones, the GDQs, and you had RPG Limit Break. And my thought was always, hey, what if we had another marathon for RPGs? So that's why I came up with the idea, and I said it's exactly 6 months away from the Limit Break marathon in November, and put it on the channel too because I thought it would be a good like merger of being able to showcase the more runners, more games to a bigger to an established audience, and at the same time we could use ours to event to also get some more eyes on the Limit Break marathon. So that was the whole idea of originally, was just a free for all marathon that didn't have any constraints, and we could show more games and give more runners more exposure and just grow the community. And obviously, since then, there's marathons, a lot of marathons now, but we try to keep doing what we're doing.
Yeah, more or less. And there's been quite a variety of games, I think, that are on there that I wouldn't say wouldn't get into Limit Break, but definitely would have a bit of a harder time getting into Limit Break, whether they be, games that don't have a ton of incentives or games that might be like really cult classic popular, but like very long and hard to fit on a schedule. Like I know you've had games like Legend of Dragoon, Skies of Arcadia, Arch and Ellico 2, games that are over 10 hours, and Limit Break's marathon itself has only taken one game longer than that, and that being Final Fantasy X, probably the most famous game that happens to have an over 10-hour speed run.
Yeah.
And it had 9 runners with it too, so
Yeah.
yeah, almost 10, but we won't talk about Magus. But yeah, like that's the good idea. The good thing about having an on-site or online marathon without any charity involvement or any other restrictions other than following the channel's rules is we can look at every game and give every game a fair shot. And that's why we always say when you're submitting, we don't care what your estimate is. Feel free to submit, and we will talk about all of them. We'll try to give everything that we can a fair shot. And we've had a wide range of games from very popular to very obscure. And it's always fun looking at the games list every year and uh, looking at games and like, I've never heard of that game before. Let's go into it. Let's find out about it. And yeah, over the years, we've now had, this is our ninth event, 6 in the main series, and then 3 spin-offs, I guess you could say, involving 2 of them charity with Hope and Healing, and the side quest, which was just a 4-day marathon. So we've amassed 399 games so far in the event, and look to add a bunch more this year.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I didn't even realize 9 events. Jeez Louise, we're getting old.
I was just thinking the same thing. I was like, that's so many.
I'll even give you the games list that I updated recently that shows all 399 games, so you can look and see all of those games that we talked about.
Wow.
Spirits, I think there's something wrong with your list. All of the games that I run are at the bottom.
You got to
Favorite?
save the best for last. You know what I say, GhostKumo?
Okay, that is a clever save there. Nah, the
You know,
games that I run, I've run a
I-
lot of games that start with the letter Y.
I think Dragon Warrior 7 for that, because there's a part in the game, in the speedrun in the game, where you have to rescue the 3 sons of a mayor, and they're all like privileged, I guess, and think of themselves, but they're really cowards and scared. And so when they're running around being chased by monsters, whenever you, doesn't matter which one you save first, he'll always be, you saved me first because you like me the most. And then the second one will be like, you saved me for second because you know I could hold out. And then the third one's like, you saved me last because you knew I was the strongest and I could take it.
That's kind of
Amazing.
great. I never got the chance to play that one. I've only played 5, 8, and 11, and a bit of 3.
I've played a
So-
couple of Dragon Quests.
Yeah.
Really? You don't say.
At the same
How many exactly?
consecutively.
Let's just say there's more dragons in Lunar Dragon Song than there is in Dragon Quest.
Wow. So speaking of the games list you posted, so obviously there's going to be games that folks run that aren't already on that list. If someone were to submit one of those runs, would they have a greater chance of getting in, or?
Not greater, not less. I mean, if you look,
Got
there's
it.
a lot of games on there that have been run multiple times.
Oh yeah.
Like, just scrolling down the list, you see things like Chrono Cross has been in there, Breath of Fire 1, 2. That's just the top of the list, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
There's games in there that have just at the top of the list that have already been in there more than once. So, when we look at things, we're obviously looking at what the submissions are, what we have, what we've taken, and sometimes we look at how long it's been since it's been into an event. So we're more than welcome to take games multiple times. I mean, Final Fantasy IV, there you go. There's something you love, is in there 4 times, and Free Enterprise is in there twice.
I don't like that game. It's the worst.
Yeah, I heard you love it. So
I love it. It's so good.
Final Fantasy Legend 2 has been in 4 times so far. So
That's because
it's-
that is a quality game.
more so than Final Fantasy IV, obviously.
Oh
yeah. So if you go through the list, you'll see there's games that have been in there multiple times, whether they're same categories, different categories, but if we get new runners, new technology, it's been a little bit since we've seen it. It gets just as much of a fair representation as everything else. We can pretty much only accept what has been submitted, and sometimes, you work with what you have.
Yeah, it is kind of something to mention too. Is I've noticed a lot of games have kind of they kind of got their foot in the water by starting off being run in Questing for Glory and then ended up getting into the marathon proper. So I have used my Questing for Glory submission videos as submission videos for other events and RPG Limit Break itself. So if you're interested in just getting marathon experience, it's a good place to start if you have something that would fit the channel.
And we actually encourage that. That's another reason why this event was placed where it was, because originally Limit Break submissions were December, early January, and our event was in November. So I would tell people this is a marathon experience in front of a good-sized crowd, and you also get a video that you can just use as your submission video. And like I always think, like, if people think that if you're in our event, you can't be in the other, but the both events are completely separate.
Mm-hmm.
Even if there is some staff that's in both events, we never like, for us, whenever we look at a games list, we don't go like, oh, that game was just in Limit Break, it's disqualified immediately, or it was just in this event, it's disqualified immediately. No, it's we focus on our event. And sometimes we take into account, like, oh, it's been seen in a lot of events in a row, like this year. Maybe we take our second option, but that's a rarity right there. But yeah, we the first one I always think of, and of the first person that submitted to his first marathon and got into ours and then immediately got into Limit Break right afterwards was Green Z Saber. I think that was the first Questing for Glory with Disgaea 5. Green Z has been a runner in multiple events since then, and I like to think that gave him a little push, to get through all this.
It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
This is like somewhat off topic, but I'm like a big stats nerd, and obviously I've looked at so many different submission periods. Something about this guy in particular tends to pull a ton of viewers on YouTube. I don't know what causes that, but I imagine that's also just like a nice thing as well. I remember that was like, if I remember correctly, that was like right around the release of Disgaea 5 when Green Z Saber was first running it.
Yeah, 2017. So.
Gosh.
God, yeah. My guess is just because you can do such wild things in any of the Disgaea games, and so the speedruns usually show that off very effectively.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those series where the people who play it casually tend to get really into the numbers and spend a lot of time grinding and doing a whole bunch of that kind of stuff. So they're just like, how on earth do you beat this in an hour? Like, because I think the record in that game is like an hour and 8 minutes in the any percent category. And kind of Something with Limit Break with when he submitted to do that game and then ran it the next Limit Break. He also submitted it to GDQ and then ran it in the GDQ afterwards, which was the first
Nice.
time that series had been at GDQ.
Mhm.
Definitely, there's been at least a few instances of runs being parlayed from Limit Break to a GDQ. I can attest to that with East Origin, which I've ran at both Limit Break 2016 and SGDQ 2017. And then other infamous examples like Virtual Hide Lied. Oh man, that was still one of my favorite runs I've ever seen at Limit Break.
Infamous is a word for that, but
I don't see why it's infamous. It's a perfectly wonderfully functioning game.
I didn't see it. I didn't
It
see
is-
anything wrong with it. I was on the couch too for commentary, and I had a up close. I was just as close as more than closer than most people, and I didn't see an issue with anything or the game either.
So here's the thing about Virtual Highlight that people don't know, by the way. If you have never been to a GDQ or Limit Break where Geyer was playing it, that is the only game I have ever seen that looks worse on a CRT than it does on a capture feed.
Oh wow.
It is.
It's pretty bad.
I don't know how it happened. Like genuinely, like I can watch a capture feed and go like, oh, this is like clearly bad and horrible.
Yeah.
You actually like play it on a CRT, and I don't know if it's the curved screen with it or something else. It's like significantly worse. Like,
Okay.
I am
is
very
still-
sorry that you got the up close and personal experience with that.
It is still the best RPG ever made in a golf engine.
Yeah, which definitely runs at frames per second.
I'm not sure that's true
Seconds per
anymore.
frame.
Golf Story exists.
I mean, you gotta be fair, okay? The idea in golf is to get the lowest score, so they were going for the lowest frames.
So in that case, what did they get, a hole in one with that game?
Oh man.
At least a birdie.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. So going back to questing for glory, what are some of like your highlights for like if you, say like people want to get like excited for the event? Do you have like a run or two that come to mind as like the quintessential? These are what questing for glory is all about. Runs. In the
Well,
past?
so when I say stuff like that, like we talk about first the games that might have difficulty getting into other events, and the shock on some people's faces when they get accepted, like Artanelico 2, when Dowolf submitted that. Had all of these other games, these short games, and when he heard that Artanelico 2 got in, he didn't believe it at first. Yeah, he said, "Why did you take this over all my other games?" Which I've said that before with Lunar Dragon Song, but it's just like games like that. You never know what we're gonna take, and we always surprise people. I mean, during SideQuest, which was just a 4-day event, we took an 11-hour speed run in Skies of Arcadia.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't even have that many hours to work with, but we're like, Skies is pretty hot right now, and this is a great runner, and why not? This is the time for it.
And that's the issue with a lot of RPGs, I find, is they're so good, but they're by design are so long. So often the speed runs end up being very long. And so that length is just prohibitive against them being in most marathons. I know it's why, the RPG Valkyries, we started our events to try and show more RPGs. And I'm sure that's similar with RPG Limit Break and Questing for Glory. And it's so good that Questing for Glory specifically can take those longer runs, because longer doesn't mean bad. It just means hard to fit so many games in a schedule.
It's not just that though. It's also like we also pride ourselves on finding unknown games,
which is even better.
I mean, like one of the ones I think of right off the top of my head is Questing for Glory 3 in 2019, Golden Treasure: The Great Green. It is basically a point and click visual novel, but it has an amazing story. It's a short run. It's under 30 minutes, and it was just a 30 minutes of chill that like, even though, because it didn't have action, it was chill, it was relaxing, and it was a nice little small break, and the runner did great with it. Like, it talked for 30 minutes straight about amazing lore and stuff. And then like you got games like Hylix 2, which it's a great game, but it's very hard to look at.
Yeah,
It's a whole
that is
video
one of
game.
the weirdest ones I've ever seen.
And another one I think of is Telefang. It's a Dragon Quest Monsters Pokemon clone from the Game Boy era in Japan only that very few people know about. But the people who know about monster type taming type games, like the ones I just talked about, know about Telefang. And there was a niche community that was excited to see that, and it was in one of our charity events even. So, like when it comes to games, it doesn't matter the length, doesn't matter the popularity. It's just, is this something that maybe hasn't had a chance before? Do we see something? Because we look at things a little bit differently than a lot of other marathons, because our goal is to just make it free for all and make it as inclusive as we can make it.
Yeah.
And then when I think of something on the other spectrum about things to talk to people about, to get excited for the marathon, I go back to one race that happened in 2019 in Questing for Glory 3. I know Plexel knows about this one. The Chrono Cross race between Andy W3321 and Evil Ash. It was about as exciting as you could get for a Chrono Cross race, because we saw some very unique things during it. Andy was in the lead most of the time, and he got to the Dragon God, he got to the final boss fight, and he got to show off one of the rare glitches in the game, by falling during the phase transitions and dying to the Dragon God because of the fall damage.
Oh no!
Which is something you almost never see.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, you had Evil Ash, who had the lowest strength that you could possibly get. Basically, I don't even think he got to 40 strength, for those who don't know or know the speed run. Like, he was like 36 strength or something ridiculously low. You want normally 40s or mid 40s for the fight. And had to pull out some really wild strats just to actually beat the final boss.
Yeah.
That as much as I know strength matters in that run, that sounds absurd.
Sounds
I don't know. So we all love the high skill, high speed races. But sometimes just watching a race where it's just like the race to not lose can be just as entertaining.
Yeah. All that RNG being like, not today, runner, and you're like, but please, I love this video game, and the video game's like, nope.
I mean, one of my personal philosophies is that the best possible run is not always the best possible marathon run. Sometimes when things go poorly, it almost leads to a better watching experience than if everything went perfectly to begin with.
They're definitely often the ones you remember.
Yeah, I mean, you never know what's going to grab your attention when you accept a run, when you do a run or anything. It's just sometimes the stars align and they knock it out of the park. And I remember, like, another thing I remember about our event is when Pink Pajamas ran Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne at the first Hope and Healing, our first charity event. And this was like the first actual like event where he was excited that there was a bid war for the ending. And like he had so much fun seeing people bid on the endings. It's something that he never had got to experience before.
Right.
And like, I had another runner opened Final Fantasy X2, who opened one of our marathons, Shadow. Never did anything in front of more than like 5 or 10 people, and there was suddenly 1,000 people watching him do a run. And I told him that, and he's like, that's like and it's just those little moments that you remember, like trying to help out other people, just seeing people go into places, like to seeing it performing in front of audiences that they've never had a chance for, or just the little things like that. And that's what I love. That's why I keep putting on this event, and every single year, and sometimes twice a year.
Those are the extra special years.
Those were the special years, that's for sure. Hopefully we're back to just one a year now.
So I guess going back to that then, what was the impetus for Hope and Healing? Obviously, Limit Break was, down for the count for those years as well. Was it just a desire to kind of fill the gap left by Limit Break, or was it, what led to that creation? And did you approach those events differently? Like, is it different when you're running an event for charity versus when you're running an event that's just there to be an enjoyable experience for people watching and hanging out?
Work-wise, yes, it was a lot more, because instead of a small handful of restreamers so I can go to bed occasionally, which I still don't.
Please sleep.
I'll hear that every year, by the way. Uh, suddenly I had 50 volunteers. I had to coordinate, get working together. I had a charity that I was working with,
Mhm.
so the workload obviously went up. But the story behind Hope and Healing was pretty much the first year of the pandemic, and Limit Break had delayed their event from May because it was just the start of the pandemic. So they were holding out hope that it would be cleared up and they could go back in October. And around August sometime, I got a message from the staff saying, "Hey, we don't think we can put an online event together. Would your staff be willing to do one, and we'll help you in any way possible with the tracker and logistics and everything, and you can do it for any charity that you want or whatever. We would like an event for charity on our channel." And I went to my staff, and it took a whole 5 minutes for them to say Nami, right?
Absolutely.
So it, like, the decision was not hard. I mean, it was just a matter of, like, are you all willing to put in a little extra work so we can make sure to get through this, And they said no problem at all. And so, like, I think it was within a couple of days, I was already responding to them that, yeah, we'll do it. And then we just put the event together off the cuff, because none of us in my staff had ever put a charity event together like that outside of RPG Chick. So, like, a lot of it was learning on the fly, learning an entire system on the fly within a few weeks.
Yep. At least with the good team you had, it turned out great.
I would say we were very successful. We raised $52,000 that first week for an event that had never done a charity event before, and then yeah, it was. I would say it was pretty successful. And our goal going into it, answering your question about mindset, about the games and stuff, our mindset was, yes, we want to have a few games in there to make sure that we make the money, because we want to raise money for charity. That was the whole point. So we tried to make sure that, like, the evenings were stacked, try to get the money where you could. But we also said, this is questing for glory. We want games that are going to surprise people or don't get a shot. And I talked about one earlier with Telefang. I've never seen Telefang before in a marathon, and we're like, yeah, we'll take it, because it gave it a shot in a marathon, and in this one, even a charity marathon where it raised money for naming monsters,
which is amazing.
Makes sense.
But yeah, so the mindset changes a little bit because you're thinking about the charity at the same time. But for us, it was we want to keep the identity of Questing for Glory, which was the what we do every year: surprise and throw in unknowns.
Yeah, and I guess that's what people also get used to coming to the Questing for Glory versus RPG Limit Break. They're just used to that kind of feel. So it even just adding a charity in there, luckily, doesn't change it up that much.
There's a lot of changes, obviously, but I think we kept the heart of our event and the heart of what the event was about, and that's the important thing.
And this event this year isn't a charity event, of course, since we did have a proper limit break this year. I was just curious how that would actually play into it. So, yeah. So
Yeah, I mean,
submissions are still
obviously
open through tomorrow, correct?
Yes, so submissions, for some reason I had this copy and pasted and it's not there anymore. Submissions are open through tomorrow night, midnight Eastern, 11:59 p.m. Eastern tomorrow night. If you're interested, there's submission forms and information about submissions right there on that handy link that I just put into chat. And we're definitely want to see some more runs. We want to give us more variety, give us more runs to argue over, and put together a week-long event. And if you come to our Discord server, you can also see that we have a public, we have a public submission list that we keep up so everyone can see, like, what's been submitted and whatnot, and a link to our Questing for Glory Discord server right there.
which you should join anyways, even if you're not going to submit. But knowing that submissions are still open, if you have one of those really long or maybe more unheard of RPGs, this is the event to get it in, folks.
Or even known RPGs. I mean,
Yeah, those
we're gonna
too.
have a mix of everything. You're gonna see, for the most part, you're gonna see the big series in there, at least in some representation, unless we don't get any submissions, and then we just like, okay, we're sorry, we can't represent, such and such.
Mm-hmm. And we can't have that, y'all. We need to get more submissions in.
Yeah, what we always say is if there's something you don't see on the list that we've never had before, maybe we've never had it submitted before.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'd be a little remiss. We got Highspirits on. We got to talk a little bit about some Dragon Quest, probably, right? I think that's a fair
No.
assessment.
But he doesn't like that game.
You don't. Dang.
Here, let me get this. Hold on a second.
Okay, ready. I'm
Take my
excited.
earbuds off here.
Yes.
Unfortunately,
I know we're not going to be able to see it very
they
well.
were having stream
because-
issues on my end, unfortunately. So.
Or it's just I have a bad backdrop
Oh
and you couldn't get anything.
no! Yeah, I was
So
gonna say
you're not going to see it too well, but
Actually,
I
right now
will.
we can't see it at all
No,
because
we
you're
can't see it
frozen
at all,
on the...
unfortunately.
I'll catch back up, I'm sure.
Yeah.
You'll at least get to see what's important.
We get to see it, and it's magnificent.
Yeah, it's got the golem hat that I thought it was Vivi for like a little bit when I first saw it, but no, it's the golem from Dragon Quest.
Everyone loves the Gollum hat. I mean, I've done so much. I've pulled I'm also an administrator in the Dragon Warrior randomizer community, and there's been a couple events where I'll pull like brackets out of the Gollum hats as just like a pulling names out of a hat thing. And yeah, maybe the stream will unfreeze and you'll actually get to see this sooner or later.
Yeah. I hope
Everyone
so,
else is
'cause-
working but the guest. I don't know. That's.
Yeah.
Discord
RPG
gonna be
limit
limit
a
breaks,
little as
right?
well.
Oh no.
So what was it that led to the kind of being the lifelong Dragon Quest fan? What brought you to the series?
Well, I've always been a fan of it, but like, this is a true story. When I first started streaming on Twitch, which was right after Crystals for Life, because the first event I ever attended was Crystals for Life 2, and I'm like, hey, all of these people here are pretty cool. I think I'll become a speedrunner and streamer too. So I started off with Lunar games. I did Lunar 2, Lunar 1 for the PlayStation. And then after about 6 months, it's like, I need a new game. And I just happened to I don't know why I did this at the time. I had like some kind of like follower goal or whatever that if I reached it, I would do the first ever English Dragon Warrior 7 speed run. So the follower goal got met, and I had to route that game entirely myself, like from the Japanese, from the Japanese runs and updates. And then after I did that, I'm like, I have a brilliant idea. I'm gonna speedrun all the Dragon Quest games, all the mainline games, because no one was really doing that, and it's like, this seems like a good niche for me to get into. So it's like suddenly I went from being just the Lunar guy to being the Lunar and Dragon Quest guy.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like way back in the. This is before like RTA was doing manipulation in DQ1. Oh hey, there we go.
There, I bumped.
Yay!
Now you can see most of the hat. 1 second, gotta slink down a little bit here. I mean, to be fair, y'all just want to see the Golem anyways, right?
We're seeing the important bit. I mean, so good. It's such a good hat.
But yeah, so this was like before like DQ1 at the time was like 6 hours, wasn't it?
Yeah, I don't think there was a sub 6 hour Dragon Warrior 1 run yet.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, so we're talking 2005, the beginning of 2015. Because my goal was to learn and speedrun the entire main series that year.
Oh gosh.
So like I went from doing 7, which right at the beginning of the year, and like went right into Dragon Quest 8, and then just went through the series, However, and ended up doing all 9 runs, like learning them and doing them all in that year. So it was just something that came together. And then of course, anyone who's been around for a while knows where that went to after those 9 speed runs. To to several attempts of a very long speed run.
Oh no. So speaking of both Dragon Quest and speedruns, do you have a favorite of the Quest speedruns between all the different games? And relatedly, do you have a favorite Dragon Quest just casually?
A 5 speed run is probably the most fun for me.
Okay.
The one that you saw me and Purple Mario do at RPG Limit Break this year. Oh, my shirt is all the way over there though. I would go grab my shirt. You know the shirts that Purple Mario made that had our wife of choice on it.
Oh yeah.
Oh gosh.
Right, because that's the one where you get to pick.
Yeah, because we had the bid war to choose the hero's wife
Uh-huh.
for the event,
Amazing.
and we were really like excited and blown away from all the money that it raised and the support. So we were very happy.
Mm-hmm.
Mario was very happy that everything was named Deborah, whether it was the bag, the daughter, and the wife.
Did your
Oh, that would have
preferred
been
wife
funny if
win?
she lost.
What was that? Sorry, Netara.
I said I was wondering if the wife you were kind of betting on won.
No,
No.
no.
Purple Mario.
Everyone chose Deborah, which was Purple Mario's favorite.
Who are you on?
I was Team Nara.
Y'all
Team
are
Flora.
both wrong. How is this possible?
Well, then who's the correct one then, Google?
Bianca. Duh.
Well, I'm just gonna say this, but I believe she got the least amount of donations, so obviously
So people are
she
just
was not the
wrong.
correct choice.
Wow, that's a lot of wrong people apparently.
But yeah, so casually, I always say somewhere like between 7, 11, and 5 are my top 3. I'm one of the rare people who love 7.
7 is not. 7 is a wild game. It's massive, isn't it? Like, wasn't the speedrun?
It's just right now I still hold the world record from
Right.
8-9 years ago. That's 15 hours and 22 minutes. But it's also just casually a game that takes over 100 hours. You know, every time you play. You know, when you play
Yeah.
it. So
It's still like, even for the time period, it's one of the games I think with the most text in it as well. Like the text files for that game are off the charts large, aren't they?
oh yeah, it has one of the largest scripts in video game history.
Yeah, there's that whole picture of like basically like 3 of these cabinets full of just like binders
Yeah.
with just like a lot of that being the text of the game.
Oh wow.
Yeah, like it's just an entire dresser closet just filled with the text. Yeah.
That is
And
Amazing.
given I think that's the Japanese version. Remember, Japanese words tend to max out at like 4 characters
Oh
long.
gosh, you're
they
right.
can express
Mhm.
much more in less space than we can in English. So, oh gosh.
Ugh.
Yeah. It's a shock that one got localized or brought to the West when games like 5 or 6 didn't have much smaller scripts, you know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's someone who's around the RPG community a lot, or just the retro game community a lot, who worked on the translation for the official translation for Dragon Warrior 7, and we always I make sure to joke about him about how terrible it is when I get the chance.
I
Wow.
was saying 'cause it came out like Dragon Warrior 7 came out like after FF7 in the West, even didn't it? If I remember correctly.
It came out after in both. It was like 2000, I think, in the
So
West.
there is a big joke with the game that came with the release of it. Yeah, it came out in 2001, I think, or something.
Mhm.
And on the instruction manual inside, this is like one of the big memes and jokes in the Dragon Quest community, is the official instruction manual. Instruction manual. If you look at the back of it, it says coming in 2002, Dragon Quest 4 for the PlayStation. We never got that.
Oh no.
Oh, no.
I think it was the company that was localizing it and translating it went bankrupt.
Yeah.
So they had advertised it on all of the official manuals, but we never got that port of Dragon Warrior Dragon Quest 4.
I mean,
Oh, no.
2000. That's like FF9 territory almost, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yep.
well, Final Fantasy VII came out in '97.
Yeah,
Gosh.
8 came out in 99.
Yeah.
9 I think was in 2000 and 10 was I think 2001.
Yeah.
So that, and then Dragon Warrior 7 over here is like, hey, here's a sprite-based game with like very light 3D models on the overworld. I think.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that was like the initial release date was
Mm-hmm.
2000 in Japan, so it's like it was still the PlayStation 1 era at the time, and
Yeah, it's just
Fair.
it's just always fascinating to think like I know Dragon Warrior 7 like cuz a game it's like kind of aged very well and people love it more over
Mm-hmm.
time, but it's very fascinating to think that like that was the era where like you had to be 3D and big or go home, and I guess Dragon
hey,
Warrior decided to go big in the wrong area, which is apparently
hey,
just this massive epic story and script with all these twists and turns.
Mm-hmm.
okay, I will give you it is a 3D game. Like you can rotate the camera 360 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
The only problem is all of the character sprites and all of the interactable objects are in 2 dimensions. So the speed run, like there's parts of the speed run where you have to pick up an item and put it on something. So
Mm-hmm.
imagine trying to pick up a 2 dimensional sprite and put it on a 3 dimensional placeholder.
Oh no,
Oh
that
gosh.
sounds agonizing.
You have to be almost pixel perfect in some of the cases to get it to actually interact.
Mm-hmm.
Ugh.
It's kind of wild thinking about in retrospect how we were so hyped up on 3D at like the advent of 3D when that
Mm-hmm.
era is generally seen as like having aged the worst, and then you look at like the sprite-based games from that era and people are like, "Wow, this game was gorgeous." Like you look at something like Final Fantasy VII, probably the killer app of the PS1, and I
Yep.
think that game has really good pre-rendered backgrounds. I actually think
Mm-hmm.
pre-rendered backgrounds get a bit of a bad rap. I would love to see more games employ them. But like the 3D models definitely left a bit to be desired. And then you look
Yeah.
same company, well, same publisher anyway, same console, and you get the original Valkyrie profile, and like sprite work and backgrounds in that game are like gorgeous to this day.
Mm-hmm.
You look at like Legend of Mana, just gorgeous
Gorgeous.
video game to
Yeah.
this day.
I mean, you could even look at it's not even that difficult to look at stuff. I mean, the classic example is Soten, but even something like I think like Lunar has
Yeah.
pretty nice sprite work for the era as well. Like Lunar 2 on the PS1, I think actually still looks fantastic today. And
Yep.
compare it to even something like the 3D models that are in Ogre Battle 64, for instance, is like the first thing that comes to mind. And that game looks okay and holds up okay, but it doesn't hold up nearly as well as some of the really nice 2D sprite work you would see at the time for those that showed when it did happen that way.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, people seem to like when you're looking, nostalgia wise, it just seems like 2 dimensions is something that translates better, and
And
it
yeah.
just looks better overall. Like as you get older.
Well, and the
Yeah,
amount of work you can and time you can put in into making it really nice, I think in some ways is easier. But that also is probably folks on the art side might tell us otherwise. But
I think it's more of a thing that it's more like the problem with like the more detailed into 3 dimensions you go, the longer it takes to do it. So like
yep.
by the time something comes out, you like people are already looking at it like, well, this is like we're already advanced past this part,
Yeah.
in a lot of
hmm
cases. So it doesn't take long. Like it's the whole I guess technology mindset of like, if you're looking for something that looks really beautiful, you're gonna be keeping up with the most recent times. And if you're someone who's like appreciates like the old style more often, then you're more likely going to like appreciate the old style longer.
Yeah, and although I suppose it doesn't hurt that like by the time of the PS1 era you had like 32-bit sprites which had accelerated far past, like the 8-bit sprites of yesteryear, whereas like
Mm-hmm.
the early 3D models had nothing before them. It was just funny looking back on the things we used to prioritize with games. I know back like around the time of like Dragon Quest 7, it was big. It was big for an RPG to be long, and then Dragon Quest 7 might have been like the first game that people started to wonder, is this game maybe a little too long?
Yeah.
And then
Where's that
nowadays,
limit?
and then nowadays we just have people like, I want my 20-hour game at most and be done with it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's why a game like even like Child of Light really has its fan bases, because Child of Light is like you're done in 15 hours, you get like the full JRPG experience and have a great time with it, and
Yeah.
then it's over. It doesn't like outstay its welcome. You don't have that issue of like, man, this game is the other example. I know that people talk about Dragon Quest 7, but the game that comes to mind for me is something like a Bravely Default 1 on the 3DS, where it's like by the time the third loop of that game is going on, you're like, all right, I get it. Let's wrap it up. It's a great game. It's got its good moments and everything
Mm-hmm.
else, but
Hmm.
it does. There are games that feel like they're about 10 hours longer than you really wanted them to be. It is very interesting to see that shift. I wonder if that's just like a thing of getting older too now. Like when we were first playing games, we were 7 years old. So when you got that first game, you put it in your console. It's like this has got to last me a month and a half until I get my next game, right? And nowadays maybe it's more of like hey,
Yeah.
I've got a Steam library with 8 million games I'm never gonna touch. Let's not waste time on getting to the next one now.
But also, it's a bit of when you were 7, you had, generally speaking, a lot more time to dedicate to games. While these days, it's like, okay, I have my, grown up responsibilities and everything. Where can I fit my gaming in? And, prioritizing those games, which are both interesting enough and, like you say, not long, but not too long.
I don't care. Give me a long game.
Yeah, I was gonna say me and Highspirits here are a little bit too knee deep in the trails hell to to be like complaining too hard about long games.
I mean, I'm probably the original long speedrunner, of the basically the entire speedrunning community, being the guy who like first several speedruns at most were 8, 9, 15 hours,
It was either you or the Forbidden Memories people.
Yeah, like Cordelian was in there pretty early on too, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like being the one of the originators of just the long speedrun community, like
I mean, you're also
give me longer.
You're the originator of the long speed run at Limit Break, even with at the first event. I remember when we did it was Spike and me did the prediction show, and we were both like, "Oh yeah, FF9's in the bag." 3 people submitted it. It's their most wanted game. The games list comes out. Lunar 2, Eternal Blue by Highspirits. I think our jaws hit the floor. Like, wait, what?
Yeah, I actually remember that post. It's like, I guess the games committee wanted to go with a different than something other than Final Fantasy from the PlayStation era. So, trust me, I was blown away too. Like I was, that was only one of a couple speed runs that I had ever done, and I'd never outside of the main event, out of my little channel here that was, it's I didn't have any experience or anything, so I was just as shocked. But
you want to walk through that run a little bit? That is still one of my favorite Limit Break marathon runs of all time. Partly because I didn't expect it, but it was just so much fun to hear the voices in the game and kind of experience this game I hadn't seen.
Like
I love that game.
When I think about that game, it's the one thing I think about the most though is more what happened after the speed run.
Oh no!
What the heck? I'll say it. Why not? The story, one of the behind the scenes stories at a Limit Break. So, after one of the big incentives I had for that Limit Break run was the bromides. Like the game has the paintings, like you can earn these paintings. It shows you like a full screen painting, and some of them are really cute, some of them are goofy, they're like, some of them are regal, like there's all kinds of paintings in it. And there's one that is very infamous that everyone knows about if they know about Lunar, and that's the Borgin bromide.
Oof. Yep.
And I just remember I even warned everyone like briefly, and then I showed it, and all I heard was like chairs falling, because we were, our first place was at a house, so I could hear the other room. I could hear chairs falling and someone running, and then but it didn't click on me what was going on. And then because I was just trying to just kind of play on the meme a little bit more, I'm like, oops, I pressed the button again, and I showed it again. And then oops, I pressed it again, and all I hear is laughing and some kind of commotion going on. And then after because we also sang the credits, so it's like, okay, after we sang the credits, we did all this stuff. I go to find out that because we were at someone's house and their children might have been around, that Vuligen jumped over a bunch of chairs to cover the eyes of one of the children when I was showing that bromide, because it's a little risky. It's not very risky, but
it's, depending on your age, it can be pretty risky. Oh no.
And yeah, that's what I remember about that run the most. Is what happened during the bromides.
I was not expecting that to be
Amazing.
where that went.
Me either. That's so good.
Oh man.
Oh.
Yeah, I didn't manage to catch enough of the first limit break. I came along for the next one. Although I did catch the first day of the first limit break, and I was like, this is the marathon I want to go to.
Mm-hmm.
And it ended up being the marathon that I went to the next year.
But yeah, like it's that's the one that's one of the best memories I have because it was the first limit break for me, and it's just the one thing about that run that sticks in my head is just what happened afterwards. Other than that, the run was fun. It was I had a donation counter for all the times I'd failed to run away. I think I had like 50 some failed to runs
Oh gosh.
in that run. So yeah. Uh, and it was just fun. It was just me and Sid and Aussie on the couch and occasion and Meta Sigma at a point. So
Mm-hmm.
I just remember that run was so much fun to watch. Like I didn't know anything about the game. I think I was hosting it even, and I'm just like sitting there and like it was such an entertaining showcase. And like to me, that's like what RPG speedruns do super well. Sometimes is you get to kind of follow along, almost in a way you don't necessarily get to sometimes with like other games. Like I kind of got to, in a way, experience Lunar 2 almost in its entirety, despite the fact that it was a speed run and it was played very quickly, which was super great. I think that's like really special, and it's something that RPG speedrunners are almost like uniquely positioned to do. And I think that's even part of the reason that like Questing for Glory can do so well with runs is when you can kind of re-experience the whole game in one sitting.
yeah, that's the RPG speedruns has, especially ones that go on more than a couple hours, have the added benefit that you're going to get the story. If you got, especially if you have a good storyteller that on either commentary or runner, is you're going to experience the story. Like Lunar 2, you couldn't skip the cutscene, so you had no choice but to experience the story. But like for longer runs, especially, you have downtime you got to fill, and especially for something like Questing for Glory, where there's there's not hosts, there's not donations, there's not things going on. I mean, it's the banter between the couch and the runner and the game. So it's a chance for you just to have fun and not have to worry about anything really.
I just want to point out the little humble brag that Highspirits did there with the, oh yeah, you've got to be, a great storyteller is what makes a good RPG speedrunner. And I was just talking, hyping up this Lunar 2 run. So he's like, yeah, I'm a great storyteller. Don't worry about it.
Oh, I know in my heart that I'm a great runner and a great storyteller. That's obvious. So
I mean, it's true. We can't even argue it because it's true.
Taking the word humble out of the humble brag and just bragging now.
Sometimes you gotta brag when you got it.
Yeah.
I know my strengths and I know my weaknesses. I just that's one of the things that's one of the things I like to think I'm good at is seeing people's strengths, seeing their weaknesses, and being able to try to do things. Whether it was my days of raiding in World of Warcraft as a healing officer for a major raiding guild, or just running events or things, is I try to see what works best and put people in positions or put things in positions where I think, is great for them.
Here's an important question though. Which alliance were you raiding with?
Horde.
Yeah.
GK, do you agree with that? I know that you apparently were a WoW player.
Yeah, Horde for life.
Yeah.
Okay.
For the Horde.
Yeah.
I was in a decent a big server raiding guild as a healing officer for like Burning Crusade and Wrath of the Lich King especially. So back in the day.
Kind of going back a bit, something I've always really thought was really cool with like RPG speed runs, just kind of as a happenstance of what it ends up meaning. RPG speedruns, by the virtue of how long they tend to be, and sometimes more methodical gameplay. Like it's not like a Super Mario 64 where you have backwards long jump tech in a lot of RPGs. They tend to be a like passion project for people in a way that's not as common amongst other speed games. Like there are people who they'll pick up a new speed game like every 3 months because they really like the movement tech and they want to bring it down, and then they move on to the next one. And like that's valid, and a lot of them, do genuinely have the passion for those games. But like RPGs, it's kind of a hard thing to really get into if you don't have that passion for the game, that the love for that game. It's something I think is probably a little bit higher on average amongst RPG speedrunners and the games that they run. Like these are, very personal, special games to a lot of them. And so that kind of manifests a lot in the speed runs and marathon runs that people do. And that's kind of one of the things I've always really enjoyed is, even if you aren't familiar with this game, there's a good chance when you go in, you'll have somebody up there who's really passionate about the game that they're running and showing off. And so I think that's kind of leads into a lot of why, Ghoul mentioned you can go into one of these runs knowing nothing about it and still have a great time. Like for me, I think the run that probably best embodies that, although it's a little bit cheating, was Quest for Glory 1 through 5 at Limit Break 2016. I was on the donation station for that run. I knew nothing about that game. That was well before my time in terms of PC games. And I thought it was one of my favorite runs in the marathon because you had the likes of Mr. P.R. Miller, who is just a fantastic speaker and presenter of those games, and really brought home just how invested in those games that he was. And then it helped that you had the developers on the call for that, which was an additional bonus for sure. But yeah, it was one of my favorite runs of a game that I had no expectations for going in.
Yeah, I do love the little things like that when you see because for us we don't have a lot of developer calls, but especially for the independent games, the indie games, there's a lot of times where the developer will just be in chat and be like, "Oh,
Yep.
game," and we'll just be like, "Click, talk to that person there," and just it's great. That's why I do love obscure games. I like to think when it comes to game committees, no matter where I'm at, one of my specialties is not always picking the main series, it's picking the other stuff, whether it's the wacky or bad games, whether it's more of the indie games. But I love having, you got to have your popular series, you do it.
Yep.
No matter what marathon. But I like trying to be the guy that does the filler stuff. I like looking for the stuff that's not everyone else is looking at.
Yeah,
That's
it
why
is.
when I
Yeah.
look at the submissions we have so far for Questing for Glory, you probably couldn't guess the runs that I'm most excited at looking at right now, because they might not be some of the games that you ever heard of, or games that you wouldn't even think about being
Mm-hmm.
in an event. So that's I see the runs right now that I'm licking my lips at, ready to talk to the games committee about.
And to
Yeah,
note,
absolutely.
you mentioned filler, but you don't mean filler in we're getting these
No.
in the schedule, because we need to fill out time. It's more so when you schedule construction for marathons, at least in the ones that I've been involved in, is kind of a bit of an art. Like you mentioned, you do have your big names like your Final Fantasies and stuff. You want to make sure that people have a reason to watch the stream and be present
Yeah.
for the marathon. But there's a lot of other games that you have opportunities to give a showcase to, and sure, they might not necessarily seem like the most when you first see them, what is this game? But in general, that doesn't mean that game isn't going to be a fantastic marathon run with a lot of presence for the event.
Yeah, when you take what you're saying, when I say something more about that is I like to make sure I'm the one who has the research. I've researched and looked into and done all the stuff for the games people might not know a lot about, because there is a lot of big series that I know very little about. Like when it comes to series that I know very little about, like Pokemon. I
Mm.
I've played one Pokemon and a randomizer in my life. I've played one Kingdom Hearts game in my life. There's a lot of big
Big time.
series that I know very little about because I've never played them, because I but I can tell you all about a lot of other rare games. I could tell you all about, other series, and it's just, I think a lot of it is because of what my stream had focused on for so long, and
Mm-hmm.
what I played growing up. Because I always say, growing up, I was a Squaresoft kid. It was that was a lot of my focus was Capcom, a little bit of Capcom, a little bit of Enix, Squaresoft. And so like my focus was a lot more specific growing up. So as I got older and started playing more, it's like, you know, I'm starting to get into some of these series that I missed. But, you know, so I rely on others for information about a lot of those bigger series.
So that actually kind of poses an interesting question to me. Are there any games that you first saw through Questing for Glory that you said, I need to play this, and then you went on to play the game and you like really enjoyed it?
Trying to think of something in Questing for Glory. Um, no, this would have happened after it. So trying to think of a game because I know there's a couple out there, but trying to go through all the games that I've seen on Questing for Glory.
Real
I'll
quick,
get back to you in a second.
while you're thinking
Yeah.
about that, if anybody has any questions for High Spirits in the chat, go ahead and start putting those in. We'll kind of get a little bit of a short Q&A session as well.
Or any of the rest of us.
Or anybody that's in the call as well.
We are veterans at this, and several of us have also run marathons ourselves.
Couldn't be me.
Ripping my earbuds out.
Don't do that. I've also reposted the submission form and the link to the Questing for Glory Discord. Reminder that submissions are still open, I believe, until tomorrow midnight. So get your submissions in if you want to be part of this event. Any sort of speedrun, like RPG speedruns, long, short, rare, common, get it in. You might pique the game committee interest.
And for the record, like we said, it's, the thing with RPG Limit Break, which is carried over into Questing for Glory, is it's not necessarily games. It's like we're super hard line on what is and isn't an RPG. Like there have been games that are more beat 'em ups. There have been like platformer type games with RPG elements. There have been all manner of games like point and click, story like text based games. Stuff in the like general umbrella that a lot of RPG fans are really into, but not necessarily a game that you would look at and say, "Oh, that's an RPG."
Mm-hmm.
So,
an RPG fighting game in custom robo.
Yeah, you could just submit what you want. The worst thing they can say is no.
I'm still waiting on the Trauma Center run, where you're role playing a doctor. It's an RPG.
Listen,
I mean, it is.
Year after
It is
year
Atlas.
that Alf is an RPG, so
It is Atlas and Shoji Meguro.
What we like to say is it necessarily if it straddles the line of an RPG. The big question is it enjoyable and is it something that people that come to this event want to see?
Yeah.
Or would enjoy seeing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why when I think of another game I think we had first that before it got into other events as an RPG was Crusaders of Senti. Is like Newtopia.
Genesis
games that
TurboGrafx.
It's
Genesis,
inspired all games that came after.
Exactly. You might think of those as adventure games more than RPGs, but it crosses the line where, you can enjoy it both. And I did think of one big game that we even talked about earlier, and Art and Elko too.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I knew nothing about Art and Elko series until I saw that. Saw it, and I love the music and I love the games. Monachemia is another one. That we had.
Good old Gust.
Yeah.
Gus.
Good old Gus.
Gus represents. I love my Gus.
So, yeah, like those are two that I can think of that I knew very little about before the runs, and that I played after that we had them.
I'll say, GK and Netara, do you have any games that you can think of from marathons you either went to or watched that you just had to play afterwards?
I mean, probably the first one that really comes to mind, and I know this is probably a simple one, but I was on the fence about actually playing Chrono Cross for the longest time, and then I saw the speedrun in 2016, and I finally played it, and I'd always, had this assumption that the game was not very good because it was like, a disgrace to what Chrono Trigger did, and as a sequel. But it's like it's kind of a very different experience altogether, and I came to really enjoy the game for its own merits, its own systems, the music especially. I think Mitsuda outdid himself with the soundtrack. So
well, it's a really great
that's
game.
the first one that comes to mind.
Just a terrible sequel.
I wouldn't even say that. I think
Mhm.
of the game as like just a successor and like a speculative alternate kind
Fair.
of timeline. As like these like the game is definitely more on the it's definitely a more downer type game compared to Chrono Trigger, which I
Mhm.
think upset a lot of people that it was a very big tonal shift.
Yeah.
um and it kind of, to me, because of the way it deals with like alternate universes and whatnot, it always felt like to me like this was one possibility of what could have happened with Chrono Trigger. It wasn't necessarily like the only thing that happened. Like the game has a whole bunch of multiverse shenanigans, so
Mhm.
like I can accept the game's like more downer tone in that sense of this was one of many possibilities.
Yeah, absolutely. For games that I've seen recently and have gotten into or have started playing, and it's a weird example because of the particular run that was there, Chained Echoes, which was in the most recent RPG Limit Break. And I say that was a weird choice because that was a very not played as intended speed run of that, but it was just so neat. And what I did see was just like, okay, I have to play this game now. There's always so many.
For me, the game that came to mind first when I thought of this, and GK actually will be able to share on this one. It's a Revolution.
Oh yeah, we did a blind race of that
Uh,
game as soon as we saw Pink Pajamas submit that Limit Break 2017. We were just like, what in the heck is this game? This game is so silly. So for anyone in chat who has not seen that run, which
Hmm.
probably a decent amount of you, it was one of the more obscure runs that has been in Limit Break. It is an RPG Maker game where it's mostly stock RPG Maker assets, but the gimmick behind the game is every NPC in the game that you talk to, as soon as you talk to them, they join your party, and you just form this enormous conga line of just characters in your party.
Oh, wow.
And so by the end of the game, you have this like 200-man conga line for the final boss, and you're just sending wave after wave of guys to defeat the final
Sounds
boss.
Oh no,
amazing.
it's even
It's
funnier. So the whole gimmick is you have to have certain numbers of party members to actually enter areas, and you can't cross your
Oh.
party conga line. You're literally playing Snake, and if
Oh
you
my
have to cross
gosh.
your own party line, you have to dismiss everybody in the conga line behind the person that you talked to, and have to
Oh
re-recruit them
no.
back into your party if you screw that up.
yeah, you can't walk through units in that game. But you can like get just about
Mm-hmm.
everything. Every enemy in the game will like can join you if you like defeat the boss of that area. You can even recruit the final boss. It's the silliest game,
But amazing.
and I love the concept of the game. Yeah, as soon as Ghoul and I saw this, we're like, we have to blind race this.
Gosh.
yeah, it is a great game. It is.
And
Uh-huh.
then we did blind race it, and we got stuck because we couldn't figure out how to access like one particular area, and then that kind of threw off the race. But it was just a fun game to play. I tried doing some speed runs of it myself, and it's harder than Pink Pajamas made it look. I'll tell you that
Oh,
much.
usually the case. I do know we do have a question in the chat, and from Wells JC, so you know it's going to be good. Why is Dragon Song the best Dragon Quest game and Lunar game at the same time?
You know, I always say, and this is a fact,
Mm-hmm.
this is pure fact. Lunar Dragon Song is the best game ever released on the Nintendo DS. The best Lunar game released on the Nintendo
Fair. Yeah.
DS,
Mm-hmm.
and it's unrivaled. It has, no one is even close to it
Yeah.
It has
when
no
it comes to
peers.
the
You are
Lunar
correct.
series.
Yeah.
You know, joking about that game. When I joked when I talked to not joked but talked about like people being surprised that their submissions get into questing for glory
Mm-hmm.
sometimes. Um, you would not believe how shocked I was when that was accepted into RPG Limit Break because
Amazing.
that was my joke submission.
Don't.
Like I had
Yeah.
I had other really solid submissions that I had put time into and was my real hope, and they accepted Dragon Song. So I did the best with it that I could, and by that I mean by apologizing and reading bad reviews about the game while I was playing it.
Yeah, it's why I do say though a little more seriously. Only submit what you're truly willing to play, or the amount of games you're willing to play, because games committees have a sense of humor and love that, and will take anything and everything.
Oh, I was willing to play it. It was just my joke submission, and I thought I had no chance because it was a 4.5-hour run with no incentives. So it's like, and it's like instead it was the perfect anchor to like the Wacky Block that year. So
Perfection.
Yeah, that reminds me of that same Limit Break 2019. Maple submitted Mega Man Battle Network transmission, and he like set a PB or a record like the year before and like broke the disc in response, and then submitted it to Limit Break as a joke, and then it got in. You're just like, does anyone have a copy of this game? I broke my old one. That was not the one I was expecting.
I mean, we always talk about the for RPG Limit Break about the mysterious Unlimited Saga disc from the first Limit Break that didn't make it home by Chaos. He accidentally left it at the event.
And then that ended up being the disc he ran. I think it was the same disc he ran the game on at this past Limit Break.
Yep, we talked about that in the interview before the run.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, jeez.
So good.
I think.
But yeah, like I think the big thing is we joke about some of these submissions, even the joke submissions, but I mean, when it comes to submitting to marathons, especially Questing for Glory here, we can't accept games that don't get submitted. So if you have games you want to run, even if it's games that you think don't have a shot that have been in recently, but there may be reasons why we take a game like back-to-back events. I mean, it just sometimes the stars align. Like the first one I think of is Yakuza Like a Dragon. We took that for 2 events in the same year. Whether it was our one event that was not charity and then one event that was charity, because it just worked out that, in that case, it would be good for charity to have that runner with that game in our thoughts, and that's what we went with. So even if you think you don't have a shot, it's been run recently, you're not even sure if it's an RPG, because trust me, I love bad RPGs too. Just submit if you want to get a game into an event, especially like even to our events. And you never know, because we always surprise everyone every year.
I think you just took Yakuza because you're like me, and the summon animation is the best thing that's ever happened to an RPG.
I took it, but I had to make sure that because I had that's another game, by the way, that we were talking about that I hadn't played yet, but played after a marathon run. Because I never played Yakuza first, but when I was examining the video and everything, I noticed some of the summons were questionable. So I had to make sure to go through the summon showcase with Froob, like, there's a couple of these we probably should not show.
Amazing.
Oh, that is such a video game.
I'm so excited for Infinite Wealth.
I'm so excited for Infinite Wealth.
That's a day one play for me too.
So that week, by the way, when that game comes out, is the most randomly stacked week in video game history. The Persona 3 remake comes out that week. That's coming out. Grand Blue Fantasy Relink is the same week. The Ace Attorney Apollo Justice Collection, I think, is the same week.
Yeah.
It's just like there's like 5 absolute banger games in that exact same week. I think Tekken 7 and Tekken 8 and the new Uni are also coming out that same weekend. If you're like a fighting game fan, it's just like stacked for no reason.
Love that for us.
I don't love it for my wallet, but
you got time to save.
No, you don't, because there's a lot of stuff coming out by the end of the year too.
Well,
I still can't even buy everything that's come out recently that I want to play. So
That actually is a
Yeah.
decent segue into. So, any good podcast, doesn't just have one episode, by the way. We do actually have. I have the next episode already lined up with our guest for the next one, which will be the current timeline. We're planning for 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks, we'll have one of these with rotating guests. So, next one, we're going to have Palmer on talking about upcoming RPGs and how to break video games. Palmer very famously recently broke Baldur's Gate 3. And I don't know if you've ever met Palmer or talked to Palmer. Palmer is one of the wildest individuals you could ever meet. It's going to be a fantastic discussion to talk about. I'm sure
And we mean
Carafe
wild
Chan will
in a
come up.
positive way.
Oh, I know Palmer very well because he's one of my staff members on Questing for Glory. But Palmer also has a record. Also, I believe he has the most copyright strikes on YouTube from a Questing for Glory run.
Yeah, that's about right.
Thanks to Crystal Chronicles, the Crystal Bears. Got about, I think it was a dozen copyright strikes the moment it hit YouTube.
Amazing. Palmer's so good though. Like you're seriously not gonna want to miss that.
So the plan for that is going to be not next Sunday, but the Sunday after, and then we're going to kind of keep rotating. So every 2 weeks we should have a new guest on, a new discussion topic, and should be a lot of fun, just like this one was. Highspirits, where can people find you if they, love your discussion and want to know more about the craziness of Questing for Glory and just all the crazy stuff you do in general?
Well, you can find me on my Twitch channel, which is conveniently, if you look at the title below the screen, has an @Highspirits on it. You can just click that and it takes you directly to my channel. I've been a long time speedrunner, although I do more casual games these days, but I do occasional speedruns, and I have my eyes set for Dragon Quest Monsters 3, The Dark Prince, coming out in December as a potential speedrun project if it's speedrunnable in a good way for setting it up as submissions. And you can that's where you can find me do my normal streams. You can also find the Questing for Glory Discord server at the link that I just placed in. Oh yeah, or Netara placed briefly before me.
I got you.
And if you ever want other news or things about the event, we have a Twitter/X account at twitter.com/questing4 glory. And that's where you can find all the information about our events, either on the Discord or the Twitter. And my personal channel if you just want to see me play games, which I'll be playing some more Dragon Quest today.
But you don't like Dragon Quest.
No, I just don't like Dragon Quest 9. That's no.
Oh no. Sad.
I just, all I can say is I'm fairly certain, no matter what, when it comes for submissions or whatever to Questing for Glory, there will probably be more dragons in Questing for Glory than there will be in Dragon Quest.
Fair.
GK, Netara, where can people find you for future reference?
Twitch.tv/GhostKumo. You can also find me at gk.football.
I love that for you. Amazing.
I'm not making that up, by the way. You can get a .football domain.
My gosh,
It was 20 of the best bucks I ever spent.
Amazing. You can usually find me at twitch.tv/Netara or at twitch.tv/the RPG Valkyries. And we have an event coming up in a month, so come check us out. But otherwise, glad to be here.
All right. I think that was a great first episode. Thank you all so much for joining me on this crazy adventure, and I can't wait to do the next one. So
make sure to submit those runs to Questing for Glory. Submissions end tomorrow night. Yes, you only got a day and a half left. Tomorrow night at 11:59 p.m. Eastern EDT. So get your submissions in before tomorrow night.
Alrighty. And we will see you all next time.